Today we're meeting Elizabeth Varley. 3 years ago she co-founded the co-working space TechHub, and it's still entirely self-funded. Now this is a startup with its eyes on the rest of the startups. She's going to be telling us what's hot and how they've managed to expand to 5 sites, including Riga and Bucharest. Welcome to Tech Sessions. We're with Elizabeth Varley today. 3 years ago, her and Mike Butcher, the European editor of TechCrunch, identified a bit of a lack of support and affordable office space for startups. So you founded TechHub.
Yes, we did. We really saw an opportunity to create a focal point for the tech startup industry in London. There was a lot of activity, a lot of things going on, but no sort of place to consistently meet other people, connect, go to, knowing that events were going on all the time and just sort of all come together in one place.
So 3 years on, how has that evolved? Because there's a lot of competition now in co-working space.
Absolutely. We really try to focus on the community elements of what we do, giving people access to each other, to big technology companies, to VCs, to PR opportunities, all that sort of thing. And it's been hugely successful. We're full to bursting in London and in some of our other sites as well. So we're now in Riga in Latvia and in Bucharest in Romania and in Manchester in the UK as well.
Yeah, so you've expanded to other sites, so there's clearly a need for this. Is it something that perhaps the government should be doing more to support with small businesses, or does it reflect the fact that banks, for example, aren't lending enough money to small businesses?
Well, when we first started TechHub, we found a lot of people saying, are the government getting involved in this? Are they helping you? And we found that it was too slow to sort of go through that route. Governments are often kind of hamstrung by the way that they work. They can't sort of just jump in and make decisions and try something out.
Well, also they don't think long term, do they? So they're not thinking, look, this company in 10 years could be the biggest. They're thinking in 4-year election cycles. It
is challenging for them to be able to really commit to certain things. But I do think that with the Tech City initiative, the government was really trying to do what it could in the short time that it has.
Well, weren't they stealing your thunder a bit though? And they're trying to sort of, confirm and celebrate a community around technology, but it's already there, it was already happening?
I think at the time when it was sort of launched, there was a bit of a backlash, particularly from startups that were already in the area, like, oh, hey, we've been here forever doing our thing, are you coming and jumping on the bandwagon now? But what's been really great about what the government has done is really talking about what's going on in London elsewhere in the world, and sort of letting people know, hey, there's stuff going on here, you might want to check it out. That's challenging for small companies to do.
Well, you could argue then that you're one of the more successful startups in London because you haven't received funding, and yet you're making money. What's your turnover?
Our turnover is about £800,000 a year at the moment, which is great. And we put most of that, well, all of it really, back into the company. We're just growing as fast as we can.
Who's been your biggest success story then?
Our biggest success story? That's a tricky one. It's Yammer, of course, has been a very successful company. When they first opened in the UK, they were in at TechHub, and they always proudly talk about that when there was just a few of them in at TechHub, and now they have a massive office locally. We had the German company Advertise. Their UK office was based with us as well. But the company that I'm quite excited about at the moment is Import.io. They've gone from being sort of 1 to 2 founders, sort of dropping in with us occasionally, to sort of taking some more permanent space, to sort of growing and growing and growing, and now they have their own space in our team spaces, where I think they have about 18 people now, and that's continuing to grow. They're getting investment. It's really exciting to watch that sort of exciting explosion for them.
You're a very exciting, interesting space because you're privileged really to see and identify a lot of trends that are coming up. What is not covered in the media about the startup space? What are the common assumptions and the kind of lazy stories that are held out again and again?
I don't know if I'd say lazy stories, but lots of people like to look at the consumer products and that sort of thing because it's sort of more sexy and exciting. But what we're seeing is a lot of B2B products aimed at businesses. They're ones that are getting funded at the moment. They're ones that are getting great clients on board and actually, having some real financial success. Not to say that consumer companies aren't, but that's an area that it's less sexy for the media to talk about, I think, but it's an area that's really very interesting. One of the trends that we're seeing at the moment is a move towards hardware software companies, which is really interesting because there's not a lot about that in the press and generally being talked about.
Yeah, that sounds very interesting. So what does a hardware software company do? Give us an example.
Well, one of the great examples at TechHub is a product called the Taxi Top. And so Richard at IT's, who's producing it, they actually create the physical sort of big triangle thing that sits on top of a taxi, the Toblerone, that sits on top of the taxi with a really excellent quality screen showing advertising. But the really interesting thing about it is they've also developed the software displaying the advertising that makes it location specific. So you can imagine that for a taxi that's moving around the city all the time, showing that, the Guardian's here doing something exciting, come and get coffee right around this area is much more relevant to here than somewhere out west. And so they've had loads of interest there. They've worked on the product. They've got a working demo, which is really exciting to see. And we're seeing more and more of these kinds of companies coming into TechHub and looking for more support. So that's also one of the things that we'll focus on a bit more when we open up in Olympic Park next year.
What are the benefits for these companies in being in a space where there are lots of other companies doing interesting things as well? And does it really come down to sort of conversations in the corridor?
Funnily enough, it does. I mean, it's a combination of things like specific opportunities that we can help provide them. If a journalist comes in to interview me about TechHub, I say, well, would you like to meet some of our companies and see what they're doing? And that can lead to great PR opportunities that can be hard for small companies to access. So there's things like that. But then it's also the low pressure time. It's the wandering off to get a sandwich at lunchtime with the person that you sort of sit next to or someone who's just joined, where you start having those sort of relaxed conversations, come up with new ideas and ways that you can work together or opportunities to help each other, and that's great. Entrepreneurs are incredibly generous with their time and their expertise, and they're always helping each other.
Where do you think we are in the cycle of the growth of this industry, thinking about maybe Gartner's kind of hype cycle? Are we just now at the peak of the potential of these industries becoming mainstream and starting to be really high value businesses, or is there still a lot of hype and puff around these ideas and we'll see a little bit of a slowdown and kind of more realism? I actually think that it's been a consistent, stable growth. I mean, yes, the government and various other things have been, startups, exciting. But I think the companies themselves are sort of growing steadily. There hasn't been the sort of throwing around of VC money in the way that we saw years ago. So I think because it's been that sort of careful, slower build, we're actually going to see a continuation of more success. I mean, some companies will always fail, fall away, and what have you. But I think which is a good thing.
Which is a good thing. Yeah. You don't want to be working on something for a long time that's not going to work. Everybody talks about failing fast. It's important to recognize when something's not working and ditch it and move on to something else. That's one of the things actually that's been really interesting at TechHub is when we've seen some of our members, their businesses haven't worked out for whatever reason, and very often the entrepreneur or the developer from that team will join another team because they've gotten to know the other startups around them. So that's actually quite nice. So I think it makes failing a little less scary when you sort of feel like, okay, I have options. If this doesn't work, I can still move on and do other things.
Elizabeth, that's been really interesting. Thank you very much for joining us on Tech Sessions.